Birds are dinosaurs. That's why they look like dinosaurs.
And some dinosaurs looked like birds. We now know there's one detail the makers of Jurassic Park got wrong. The raptors should have had feathers. The fossils from China proved it. Since the first discoveries, Liaoning fossil collectors have turned up feathered dinosaurs from many different dinosaur clans. All are from branches of the tree close to birds and Archaeopteryx. Some are from the same clan as Deinonychus. Others are from more primitive groups like oviraptors and tyrannosaurs. And that means all the dinosaurs in this part of the tree had feathers, wherever they lived in the world.
We would assume that an oviraptor that we find in Mongolia or a tyrannosaur that we find in Montana would have also have had feathers. So everywhere you go in the world, all of these advanced theropods were covered with feathery body coverings.
Feathers could have been useful to the ancestors of birds long before they took to the air. There's nothing better for insulation, which may have been their original function. They can be used to bluff an enemy, attract a mate, or simply to show off. But long feathers attached to the arm and finger bones are the signature of flying birds. And they were missing from the feathered dinosaurs of Liaoning. There were no clues to how earthbound dinosaurs achieved flight until the strange fossil arrived on Xuxing's doorstep. As he examined it that first day, it looked like it could be a missing link with a bird's wing and a dinosaur's long tail and legs. But it had something else that he'd never seen in any dinosaur or bird.
I noticed something strange. Long feathers attached to the foot. This is so bizarre. You don't know anything, any animal has this long feather attached to the foot.
A two-winged dinosaur would be a spectacular find. But four wings border on science fiction. Nothing in the world today has feathers on its feet. And this was the first clue that such a thing ever existed. Xu named it Microraptor.
And we started thinking of what this means. And then it brings a big story about origin of flight.
The origin of flight in birds is a puzzle that seems to defy solution. The aerial skills of modern flyers evolved in small steps over millions of years, and the fossil record provides few clues to how it happened. It's one of the oldest debates in paleontology, and for decades it's been a standoff between two opposing theories. One has argued that flight must have evolved from the ground up. The ancestors were running dinosaurs, already feathered, probably to conserve body heat. Over time, the feathers could have been adapted for flight as bodies became smaller and the running leaps of dinosaurs evolved into the powered flapping flight of birds. But not everyone bought it.
It was always a hard sell because with a terrestrial origin of flight, flight that originated from running fast on the ground, you're always working against gravity. But an arboreal origin of flight, where you fall out of a tree, you accumulate airspeed whether you want to or not.
In the arboreal scenario, the bird ancestor was a small climbing animal that evolved flight by gliding from the treetops. And that seemed to rule out dinosaurs, which presumably couldn't climb trees.
The ground-up origin of flight didn't make good physical sense, but it seemed to be essential to the dinosaur origin of birds, and that made us suspect that the dinosaur origin of birds was wrong too.
Fossil bird expert Larry Martin has been a thorn in the side of dinosaur paleontologists for decades.
People are going to simply have to explain how you can originate birds from dinosaurs, which apparently can't get up in trees.
Years later, he's still at it.
So if you really love dinosaurs, then my arguing that birds aren't dinosaurs is sort of like taking away Christmas.
I get really frustrated by this just because we shouldn't be having to deal with something which has been settled for 20 years. I don't know when Magellan got back from sailing around the world, if he was frustrated too by people who still said the Earth was flat.
It was hard to imagine what kind of evidence could break this deadlock, until Microraptor turned up. A four-winged dinosaur is a clue that no one expected. For Martin, it's evidence that he was right, at least about the origin of flight.
I think that Microraptor completely destroyed all hope for a terrestrial origin of flight. This is an animal that probably couldn't even walk on land comfortably, let alone run. And so you're looking at something that's probably completely arboreal.
Shu thought the same thing. With feathers on its feet, Microraptor must have lived in the trees. But he's also quite sure that it was a dinosaur. Numerous details of the skeleton say so, from the long bony tail to the sickle claws on its feet. Shu also believes it must have been able to fly.
I noticed the feather shape. This animal has feathers like feathers in flying birds.
The wing feathers are asymmetrical, with veins wider on one side of the shaft than the other, which forms an airfoil contour, like an airplane wing. Only flying birds have asymmetrical flight feathers. But unlike modern birds, Microraptor had not yet evolved the specialized shoulder anatomy for powered flapping flight. It was more likely a glider, like a flying squirrel. So Shu concluded that gliding came before flapping in the evolution of birds. He presented Microraptor to the world as a synthesis. Flight began with gliding from the treetops, and the glider was a dinosaur.
Those feathers will change the whole idea how dinosaurs evolved into flying birds.
It looked like Shu had finally cracked the origin of flight. But within days, another scientist announced that he'd solved it and come to the opposite conclusion.
We think we have the answer. And we didn't make it up. Birds told us.
Man, to be able to catch these guys.
Ken Dial is a well-known experimental biologist and a strong believer in the dinosaur origin of birds. He's convinced that the powered flapping flight of modern birds really did begin on the ground with a running start. Dial studies living birds called chuckers. They can run within hours of birth, although they can't fly until they're a few weeks old. He found that long before they can fly, young chuckers use their developing wings to scramble up inclined surfaces to a safe refuge. Over time, the wing beat that helps them scramble becomes the power stroke that helps them fly. There's no gliding involved. Powered flight comes first, even on the way down. Dial believes this is a primitive behavior common to all birds, reflecting their evolutionary history.
I think you're looking at the evolutionary process through this developmental process. And what these animals do, we think, is paralleling the evolution of what transpired between the theropod dinosaurs to modern-day birds.